February 15th, 1942, 1:31 a.m. The sleepy Caribbean island of Aruba is shaken from its slumber by an enormous explosion. Rudely awakened locals rush to their windows, rubbing their eyes in disbelief as they peek through the palm trees at the horrific scene before them. A British oil tanker anchored in San Nicolaas harbor is engulfed in huge flames that light up the moonless night like a colossal bonfire. Panicked sailors jump overboard into the still waters, desperate to escape the raging inferno. The locals watch in horror as smoke billows toward the star-scattered sky, the heat from the thousands of gallons of burning oil in the balmy tropical night becoming unbearable. They wonder what careless mistake could have caused such a tragedy and interrupted their peaceful way of life. Suddenly, a second deafening blast rings out, sending shockwaves across the island. Just offshore, another British tanker flares up in a spectacular blaze. As they survey the chaos, it's all too clear. This was no accident. On January 19th, 1942, 3 German U-boats slipped out of their pens in Lorient, France, and into the cold waters of the Bay of Biscay. U-156, U-67, and U-502, under the commands of Werner Hartenstein, Gunther Müller-Stockheim, and Jürgen von Rosenstiel, respectively, begin their perilous 4,000-mile journey across the vast Atlantic Ocean, bound for the much warmer climes of the Caribbean. Just days earlier, on January 15th, Vice Admiral Karl Dönitz, commander of Germany's U-boat fleet, had gathered these experienced commanders in Lorient to brief them on Operation Neuland, or New Land. The objective of this daring plan was to hit the Allies where it would hurt, right in their oil supply. A large proportion of Britain's oil came from the Caribbean region, with Venezuela alone supplying more than 40%, and it represented a vital source for the United States as well. By disrupting this crucial supply chain, Dönitz hoped to starve the Allies of the fuel they desperately needed to continue the war effort. Now, as the U-boats stealthily cut through the Atlantic waters, maintaining radio silence to avoid detection, their crews prepared for the mission ahead. This was exactly the kind of long voyage that these Type 9 submarines had been designed for. Significantly larger than the standard Type 7 U-boats, with a length of 251 feet and a displacement of 1,786 tons when submerged, these marvels of German engineering boasted an impressive range of nearly 12,500 miles, allowing them to cross large sections of the globe without needing to stop to refuel. Nevertheless, conditions on board were far from comfortable. Fresh water was strictly rationed, with men limited to 1 shower per week. The air inside quickly became stale and humid, filled with the odors of unwashed bodies, diesel fuel, and machine oil. Meanwhile, the heat became almost unbearable, with the crews having to rotate duties frequently to avoid exhaustion. After nearly a month at sea, battling fatigue, discomfort, and the constant threat of Allied patrols, the U-boats finally approached their designated positions. U-156 took up station off Aruba, U-67 near Curacao, and U-502 patrolled the shipping lanes leading from Lake Maracaibo. As they prepared for their coordinated attack, scheduled for February 16, 1942, tension mounted among the crews. With much of Europe under German control and the United States still reeling from the attack on Pearl Harbor, a successful operation in the Caribbean could tip the balance of the war decisively in Germany's favor, while failure could turn the tide toward the Allies. The moment of truth was fast approaching. After days of silent observation, as night fell on February 15th, U-156 emerged from the tranquil tropical waters of San Nicolaas harbor, less than a mile from the Aruban shore. Ahead lay 2 unsuspecting British oil tankers, SS Pedernales and SS Oranjestad. Hartenstein's attention first turned to Pedernales. As the clock struck 1:31 a.m. on February 16th, Commander Hartenstein gave the order to unleash a torpedo from U-156's bow tubes. The submarine's crew held their breath for a few seconds as the torpedo went streaking through the water, before a thunderous explosion let them know it had struck true. Pedernales had been hit amidships and was now erupting in a violent ball of flames as her cargo of crude oil ignited, claiming the lives of 8 crew members and wounding the ship's captain. Terrified of suffering a similar fate, Oranjestad immediately lifted anchor and attempted to escape. However, Hartenstein had other plans. Another well-aimed torpedo from U-156 wiped out 15 sailors and stopped the oiler in her tracks. She eventually sank in around 230 feet of water an hour later. Hartenstein wasn't done yet. As Dutch sailors in the harbor desperately boarded small boats to leave the rapidly spreading inferno, he headed for Eagle Beach. There, he turned his sights on SS Arkansas, a Texaco-owned tanker. Though U-156 fired 3 torpedoes, just one hit its target and only caused minor damage and no casualties. Undeterred, Hartenstein pushed on toward one of Aruba's oil refineries and prepared to bombard a large tank near the shore using U-156's deck guns. However, the crew of the 105mm gun soon realized they had made a grave error, forgetting to remove the weapon's water cap. Upon giving the order to fire, Hartenstein looked on in horror as the gun exploded back toward the gunners, severing the foot of one sailor and mortally wounding another. Nevertheless, the attack continued using the 37mm flak gun, but with limited success. Hartenstein ordered the crew to stop firing and headed for the other side of the island. Despite a run-in with a Dutch Fokker F-18 maritime patrol aircraft, U-156 escaped unscathed. While she had failed to blow up the oil refinery, the successful torpedoing of the Allied tankers represented a devastating opening salvo in Germany's Caribbean offensive. Meanwhile, off the coast of nearby Curaçao, U-67 had snuck into the harbor of the island's capital city, Willemstad, not long after midnight. Finding 3 Allied tankers anchored there, Commander Miller-Stockheim ordered a barrage of 6 torpedoes. While 4 failed to explode, the 2 from the stern tubes hit the Dutch oiler Rafaela, causing serious damage. A pair of tugboats attempted to tow her to safety, but she broke in half and sank in Sintana Bay before later being raised and repaired. At the same time, U-502 eagerly lay in wait in the Gulf of Venezuela for shallow draft oil tankers on their way to the refineries in Lake Maracaibo. As Allied vessels approached one by one, Commander von Rosenstiel would give the order to pick them off like an underwater sniper. The U-boat's first victim was the British SS Tijuana, followed by the Venezuelan Managas and another British tanker, SS San Nicolaas. In just 3 hours, U-502 had sunk as many ships. The coordinated assault caught the Allies completely off guard. The Caribbean, long considered a safe backwater far from the front lines, had suddenly become a war zone. As news of the attack spread, panic gripped the islands. On Aruba, civilians fled from coastal areas into the cacti-studded interior. On Curaçao, Chinese tanker crews, terrified by the sudden violence, staged a mutiny, refusing to sail without military escorts. The impact of Operation Neuland's opening night was immediate and severe. Within hours, oil shipments from the region ground to a halt. The flow of vital fuel to the Allied war machine, once taken for granted, was now under serious threat. As the sun rose over the Caribbean on February 16, 1942, it illuminated a changed world, one where the specter of war had finally reached these tropical shores. Soon enough, additional U-boats had arrived in the Caribbean, allowing the Germans to widen the scope of the attack beyond the Dutch Antilles. Among these reinforcements was U-161, commanded by Albrecht Achilles, tasked with striking the British island of Trinidad. On the night of February 18, 1942, Achilles navigated his submarine through the treacherous Boca de Dragon Straits and into the Gulf of Paria toward Port of Spain, the island's capital city and a crucial Allied harbor. As this shallow body of water was considered impenetrable to submarines, the ships anchored there didn't believe they could be at risk from enemy attack. Achilles was about to prove them wrong. At 1:08 a.m., U-161 fired 2 torpedoes, striking the British freighter Mokihana and the American tanker Kongsgaard. The explosions rocked the harbor, sowing confusion and panic among the Allied forces. Before the defenders could mount an effective response, U-161 slipped away, leaving chaos in her wake. As February turned to March, the U-boats continued to wreak havoc across the Caribbean. U-129, under the command of Nicolas Clausen, focused on intercepting bauxite freighters southeast of Trinidad. This vital resource, crucial for aircraft production, was another key target in the German strategy to cripple the Allied war effort. The unexpected onslaught forced the Allies to suspend merchant ship sailings temporarily. In an attempt to mitigate losses, they began broadcasting suggested routes for unescorted merchant ships to follow. However, this well-intentioned measure backfired spectacularly when German intelligence intercepted these transmissions. The U-boats simply lay in wait along the suggested routes, picking off Allied shipping with ruthless efficiency. By the end of March 1942, the toll of Operation Neuland was considerable. In just 6 weeks, German U-boats had sunk 45 Allied ships in the Caribbean, mostly oil tankers and cargo ships, and damaged several others. The human cost was equally devastating, with hundreds of merchant seamen losing their lives. The Caribbean, once a tropical paradise, had been transformed into a graveyard of ships. The waters that had previously seen only pleasure craft and merchant vessels were now littered with oil slicks, debris, and the grim evidence of war's brutal reality. The devastating success of Operation Neuland finally jolted the Allies into action. The United States, which had been focusing its defensive efforts on protecting the Panama Canal from a potential Japanese attack, now realized the urgent need to secure the entire Caribbean basin. One of the first steps was to establish a unified command structure for the region. The Caribbean Defense Command, headquartered in Panama, was given overall responsibility for coordinating the Allied response. This allowed for better integration of naval, air, and land-based assets in the fight against the U-boats. The Allies also began to rapidly expand their air and naval presence in the Caribbean. The United States pressed for its rights under the 1940 Destroyers for Bases deal with Britain to establish new military bases across the region. Airfields were hastily constructed on islands such as Trinidad, Jamaica, and Antigua. These new bases allowed for increased air patrols, significantly reducing the areas where U-boats could operate freely. Admiral Ernest King, Commander-in-Chief of the U.S. Fleet, ordered the implementation of a convoy system in the Caribbean. Although this measure was not fully in place until July 1942, it would prove crucial in reducing shipping losses. The convoys, escorted by destroyers and aircraft, made it much more difficult for U-boats to attack merchant vessels without being detected and counterattacked. New technologies also played a vital role in turning the tide against the U-boats. High-frequency direction-finding equipment, known as HFDF or HFDUF, allowed Allied forces to triangulate the position of U-boats when they transmitted radio messages. Improved radar systems and the introduction of the Lee light, a powerful searchlight mounted on aircraft, made it possible to detect and attack surfaced U-boats at night. The Allies also worked to improve their anti-submarine warfare tactics. Naval officers and air crews received specialized training in detecting and attacking submarines. New weapons, such as the Hedgehog anti-submarine mortar, provided surface ships with more effective means of engaging submerged U-boats. Despite these improvements, the battle for the Caribbean remained fierce throughout 1942. The U-boats, while facing increased resistance, continued to find opportunities to strike at Allied shipping. The waters around Trinidad and Aruba remained particularly dangerous, with U-boats often lying in wait for tankers leaving the oil refineries. As 1942 drew to a close, however, the balance began to shift. The increased Allied presence, improved tactics, and new technologies gradually eroded the U-boat's ability to operate effectively in the Caribbean. The hunters were slowly becoming the hunted. Allied air power also played a crucial role in this reversal of fortunes. Long-range aircraft, including B-24 Liberators and PBY Catalinas, patrolled vast stretches of the Caribbean, forcing U-boats to spend more time submerged. This not only limited their ability to attack, but also reduced their overall operational range and effectiveness. As Allied anti-submarine measures improved, U-boat losses mounted. Of the approximately 90 U-boats that operated in the Caribbean throughout the war, 37 were sunk by Allied forces. The majority of these losses occurred in the latter half of 1942 and early 1943, as the Allies gained the upper hand. By May 1943, Karl Dönitz, now Grand Admiral and Commander-in-Chief of the German Navy, was forced to acknowledge that the Caribbean was no longer a viable hunting ground for his U-boats. He ordered a withdrawal from the region, effectively bringing Operation Neuland to a close. The last major U-boat success in the Caribbean came on July 6, 1944, when U-516 sank the tanker S.O. Harrisburg. This isolated incident served as a reminder that the threat, while greatly diminished, had not been entirely eliminated. The conclusion of Operation Neuland marked a significant turning point in the Battle of the Atlantic. While the Allies lost hundreds of ships and thousands of lives, and saw their oil supplies severely threatened at a critical juncture, they weathered the storm of the U-boat offensive and emerged stronger, with improved tactics, technology, and coordination. Meanwhile, for the Germans, the loss of experienced U-boat crews and the strategic failure to maintain pressure on Allied shipping lanes in the Caribbean represented a significant setback that formed part of a broader reversal of fortune as the Allies gained the upper hand.